Hi everybody, it's John back with another model inbox review. I don't think I need to tell everybody what this type of aircraft is, but maybe I need to let everyone know what the mark of aircraft is. The mark is actually telltale given away by, there's a couple of bulges on the forward section of this early production Spitfire Mark IIA. Just below the exhaust sections and directly behind the spinner boss, there's actually a little blister, and just above the exhaust, directly behind the third pipe there's another blister, and these were additions to the Merlin type. I'm trying to remember which Merlin it was. I think it's a Merlin 12 engine, which had improvements to the aircraft's ignition system to enable it to start up without the use of the electrical ground trolley, which was a common feature during the Battle of Britain with Mark 1s and Mark 1As. So this is actually a Spitfire Mark 2A of the Mark II genre of Spitfire early production versions. We'll start first of all with the boxing history. The kit I'm actually doing an inbox review on is a 72nd scale old tool Revell Spitfire Mark II, which was actually originally released as a Spitfire Mark I think it was originally released as a Mark II, but it was also incorporating releases for Mark 1s as well. And I'll get to that when we get to the actual boxing history. So we'll start with the boxing history. The kit was actually originally released in 1962 as a Supermarine Spitfire Mark II in 1/72nd scale of the famous plane series. This particular artwork was utilised extensively in a lot of the Revell releases in the 60s, as you'll see soon. But this was the first box artwork that was released in 1962. So this kit is going to form part of my real old school video series. And the kit isn't a kit to be avoided like the plague. Yes, it is an old tool, but I think it actually isn't a bad kit. And I'll get to that when we're going through the plastic in a minute. So 1962 was the first release year for this kit. In 1964, the model was re-released using the same artwork. And it's basically an identical box, but the kit was actually re-released 2 years later in 1964. And then in 1966, the kit was incorporated into a special Battle of Britain fighter set, which incorporated an RAF Spitfire. I do believe the Spitfire was supposed to be a Mark 1, and a German Messerschmitt Bf 109, which was the original E variant of the 72nd scale release kit, and that god-awful RAF Hurricane Mark 1 that was released by Revell in the early 60s as well. So this kit on the right hand side, on the left hand side here, this is actually the same model that we're doing an inbox review on. It's the same sprues, everything, exactly the same, but it had different decals for this particular set. 1966, this kit is actually quite rare if you ever come across one. It's very collectible. 1966 was also another re-release of the original boxing from Revell. No changes in the box artwork, no changes in the box at all, but I think there might have been a serial number change, but don't quote me on that. 1966 went through to 1966 release from Kikola of the Supermarine Spitfire in a Scala 1/72nd scale. The same box artwork again, but Revell released a lot of kits with different marketing brands for different countries around Europe, South America, and also Far Eastern Asia, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. But 1966 was a big year for this particular kit. So the Revell Kikola label was released, the Spitfire Mark II, just as a Supermarine Spitfire. It was also released as part of a Flying Deuces set 3 years later in 1969. Now, I don't understand why a Mark II Spitfire would ever be flying as an anniversary for an ME262, perhaps because Revell didn't have a later Mark Spitfire in model form, so they just put these two kits together. But the interesting thing about these two kits is that they were actually released in different colour plastic. you'll see with the next image we've got, this is what you actually got inside that Juices fighting set. You had a Mark II Spitfire in brown plastic and an ME262 in olive green plastic. And you have two separate transfer sheets, a complete dual instruction leaflet, and actually some other promotional gumph as well that came in the kit as well. But it was interesting that the two models are actually moulded in completely different plastic colours. So that's 1969's release for the Fighting Juices set, comprising a Spitfire Mark II and the Messerschmitt ME262A1. 1969 was also another year where Revell released the Spitfire in the original box artwork in 72nd scale through Revell Japan. This was the kit released for the Far Eastern countries in 1969. It was also released by Revell Coca-Cola. I think Coca-Cola was actually a brand for South America, Brazil, Argentina, all over South America. I think Coca-Cola released it in the Spanish-speaking countries throughout the Southern Americas and the Central Americas. And this kit was released in '69 again. You had a 1974 release. They changed the boxed image to show the kit made up. What's interesting is that the decals that you get on this particular kit are actually the same decals that you get on the kit that I've got, but my model is a later release boxing. And you'll see in a minute NKK, although the other variants of the kit weren't supplied in the boxing that I've got. It's interesting because when you see the parts that I'm going to show you on this particular model, the Spitfire Mark I was an obvious choice, but there are obviously extra parts involved in this particular kit to produce the Spitfire Mark I, because the image on that boxing there is of a Mark I with a two-bladed propeller. And there's also a Mark I with, it's a Mark IIA with YTL and NKK with a three-bladed propeller. So obviously they only produced the Spitfire Mark I with a single blade propeller. But I've got something to say with this kit with the transparency, which we'll have a look at, and I'll explain a little bit about the transparency when we have a look at the transparency part in a minute. 1974 produced this release with the kit made up in 3 different variants on the front with the collector's choice 72nd scale Spitfire Mark I and Mark II. Now in 1974 also released this kit through Ladela. I'm not sure who Ladela sold. Perhaps it was Portugal, Spain and Italy, I'm not sure. But this is exactly the same model that you got through the original Revell release from 1974. 1978, and this is actually the release that I've got. This is of a Spitfire Mark II. The instructions tell you it's a Spitfire Mark II, but the actual boxing just explains that it's a Supermarine Spitfire. So that's 1978 release. One of the things I liked about this particular boxing and the previous boxing is that it shows images of the kit made up, and you can see that the model, although it's quite old and it has quite a dated look about it in terms of the overall finish, it's not a bad kit. It actually wasn't that bad at all. 1978 leads through to 1979, and again Lodella produced with the original artwork of the Supermarine Spitfire. That was released in 1979, and then in 1980 he had a change of box artwork, and this really shows how dated this particular kit is. I don't think the decal application on this particular made-up kit is that professional. There's a lot of backing film showing on that particular model's image, but this is a company called Revell CG. Not quite sure where this kit was released through either. Yeah, that's interesting, and I can't quite make out what language that is on the top there. Langer, Lenthe, is that German? Is it Dutch? I'm not sure. Not quite sure. It'd be quite interesting if a subber could send through and let us know about where Revell CG was marketed in. But this is a brand new type of artwork, and it was released in 1980, and this artwork was again re-released in 1984 by Revell Lodella as a Spitfire Mark II. Again, released originally as a Supermarine Spitfire, but it's exactly the same kit that you had before, and you can see that it's not particularly fantastically made either, is it? That canopy fit isn't brilliant. So 1984 goes through to 1995, and believe it or not, this is the last boxing of the Supermarine Spitfire from the original 1962 mould, and it was released in Revell's modern blue box stylings, but it's the original kit that was released 33 years prior to this. So it's an old kit even if you get this particular model. The Spitfire Mark II was actually replaced in 2016 by this model. And to all intents and purposes, according to the pro builders, this particular kit is one of the best on the market. The Airfix model new tool generation kit, the Spitfire Mark I and Mark II, isn't a bad offering either. I've actually built a Mark I from that particular kit and it's not bad, but the Revell kit is supposed to be superior to the Airfix model, so that would be quite interesting if you could get hold of one of these and build that too. So that's 2016. We'll leave you a nice image there of a Spitfire Mark II in the modern airshow circuits, and this just shows you the lines of the Spitfire Mark II. I think the Spitfire is one of the most beautiful aircraft that has ever been designed, built and flown, and it's a superb aircraft. What I want to do quickly now is just pan the camera down. I'll just do this as quickly as I can, try and make as little noise as possible, because I know some of you guys don't like my camera stand, but at the moment there's not a lot I can do about it. So what I'll do now is we'll just have a look at this particular boxing. This is the boxing I've got. This is the 74 release? I think it was 1974 release. Just show you some of the images on the side here. It says features of clear canopy, build with extended or retracted landing gear. The undercarriage main wheels, main oleo wheels, they do rotate, and the propeller rotates on this kit as well. Another image there of the kit made up. Yeah, and some safety images there. Colours and paint suggestions. That's interesting. This particular box must have been a rebox, because I can see this. It says produced by Revell Incorporated in 1978. So this particular kit must have hit the shelves in 1978. Interesting. Right, it's a flip top lid. There's no open enders on this. What I'll do is I'll just quickly, actually I'll turn that box upside down. We'll just put the plastic into here, because there are a few things I want to say about the plastic, which is quite interesting. We'll get to that in a minute. Pull that up. We'll have a look at the decals in a minute, because the decals in this particular boxing aren't bad. And we'll have a look, just a quick look at the instruction leaflet first of all. The instruction leaflet opens up into about A4. Try and bring this out for you as quickly as possible and as easy for you to see as possible. On the front of the page, on the instruction leaflet, you've got a paint colour plan and a decal ID location on it as well. And there's your three major colours. It says light blue, but the Spitfire was actually, underside was duck egg green. It says matte olive green and matte earth. The major colours used are covered by the Humbrol colours, which are matte 90 for the underside, matte 30 and matte 29 for the top coat. The propeller is usually painted in either matte white or matte black. The spinners on the Mark IIs tended to be either those two colours. And they also tended to have a band here, but this particular one doesn't have one. It doesn't state which squadron this kit was from, whether it served in the Battle of Britain or just after, I'm not sure. There's no details about the aircraft that they're actually asking you to model. Alright, sorry about that, got a bit of a cough still. You've got two assembly icons here, which is do not cement, optional parts, and soak and apply decal, which is quite easy to follow. And then the kit actually makes up in 18 stages, which is quite a lot, but there's not many parts going on, not much going on in each stage. But basically, sections 1, you're putting the wings together. Sections 2, you've got the interior. It's got an interesting floor pan on this, hasn't it? Yeah, and the pilot, and then you marry the pilot and interior to the wings. in section 3. And then in section 4 you're basically putting the fuselage halves together, and then section 5 you're marrying the wings to the fuselage, and section 6 you're putting the tailplanes and the exhaust stubs into place. I tend to put the exhaust stubs into place after the kit's been painted. I find it easier to paint the exhaust stubs and get a decent effect on them before you apply them to the plane. Section 7, 8 and 9. Section 7 and 8 are basically the underside fixings and features, including the pitot tube part 26 there, and section 9 is to choose whether you want the aircraft on undercarriage down or undercarriage retracted. And then section 10, you basically put the undercarriage oleos together, which is interesting because the legs don't seem to go all the way down. And then you're putting the undercarriage into place in section 11, and then you repeat that for section 12 and 13. And section 14, you're basically just putting the undercarriage into the raised position. And I think you've got to chop off 2 of the little locating pins at the end. Section 15, the cockpit canopy and the aerial mast goes into place. And 16, 17 and 18 is all to do with the assembly and attachment of the propeller. Quite easy to follow, instructions quite easy to follow, not an awful lot I think that can fool you or trick you there. The decals, now then, the serial number on this kit is H50, and I don't think H50 has changed an awful lot since the kit was originally released. I think the original release serial number was H213 or possibly 212, I can't remember, but it changed to H50 when the kit became a specific Spitfire Mark II. And the decals on this particular release are of the, I would say, the better quality decals. They are definitely better quality than the decals you would have got in the early boxings from the 60s. Basically, in the early boxings from the 60s, you'd have had the fin flashes, you'd have had some sort of squadron insignia, the side roundels and the underwing and upper wing roundels, but you wouldn't have had hardly any of these stencils to play around with at all. But I am a bit disappointed because those fuselage side roundels, the register on them seems to be pretty poor. And I might have to look in my decal stash to see if I can get them replaced, because they don't look fabulous, do they? That's a bit of a shame, but the decals themselves, they seem to be quite good. You know, they're not too pronounced. The backing film seems to be quite clear, and they're printed quite clearly as well, quite nicely printed. So I'm quite pleased with that. We'll put the decals into the instruction leaflet and then we'll have a look at this. This is one of the issues I have with this kit, and unless you know a little bit about early generation Spitfires, you won't truly understand what I mean, because this particular Mark II Spitfire appears to have a Mark I early style cockpit canopy. And what I mean by that, let's just take this out of the way, hopefully it's focusing a bit better now. What I mean by that is that it doesn't seem to have a blown canopy hood. The replacement for this style of canopy was called the Malcolm hood, that was introduced in the summer of 1940 during the Battle of Britain. A lot of Spitfires that flew during the Battle of Britain were actually Mark I's, and they were equipped with this style of canopy, but they were later retrofitted for the Malcolm style hood, which had a much more blown canopy style and a proper bulletproof forward windscreen. And this canopy doesn't appear, it appears to be a Mark I early generation manufactured canopy, which would have left the factories no later than about February 1940, maybe March 1940. So that is quite interesting. You might be better off, if you buy this particular kit, to build a Mark I from it, or yeah, Mark I would say, rather than a Mark II, which is a bit of a shame. But the canopy seems to be quite clear, and it seems to be, you know, quite nicely rendered. We'll have a look quickly at this. This is the propeller. Not much to write home about there, is there? Seems to be quite nicely crafted. There's a little bit of flash on it, like there's a little bit of flash on most of the parts in this kit. The first sprue we're going to have a look at is the one that incorporates the lower wing. One of the things I like about this particular kit is the lower wing is in one piece. A lot of early release model Spitfires, you had the wings in two separate parts, and really to produce a good quality, good looking Spitfire, you need the lower wing in one piece, so that this is all incorporated into the one piece wing. I'm not sure about the actual width of those and the position of those undercarriage apertures for the wheel wells. They look like they're actually angled in the wrong angle, and they look a little bit big and misshapen, which is a shame, but that's probably more to do with the fact that you have to build the oleos and the undercarriage in the way that the kit's asking you to do it. Some of the other parts there, they're a bit flash filled. The exhaust stubs there, they're not too bad, but the other parts, they are going to need some cleaning up. And the other thing, although I'm not that much bothered too much about the fact that this kit is Rivet City, you can probably sand some of those rivets down. The thing you have to remember about the Spitfire is that it was entirely built flush riveted. It was quite an expensive aeroplane to build, and those rivets in this scale shouldn't be really more than a tiny dimple, and these are raised, quite seriously raised rivets, and they're going to have to be taken out because that certainly is not right. Second sprue incorporates the fuselage halves, the tailplane, and some of the internal features, and those pretty awful undercarriage oleos. Just have a look at those there. The undercarriage oleo legs don't even go all the way down the doors, but that's probably to incorporate the fact that the tyres will rotate on this kit. Again, the tailplane rivet features there are quite extensive, and I don't really think that fabric covered elevator is that good. It looks a bit, well, it looks a bit poor, to be honest with you. It's not a good rendition of that. Not that impressed with that. Also, the tail fin on this particular kit looks a little bit, it's a bit badly shaped. It is an early generation kit, and a lot of Spitfires were released with that sort of shape of tail fin, but I don't think that tail fin is the correct shape. It looks a little bit weird. And the rivets on this fuselage, actually it's quite nice at the front, it looks alright at the front, but at the back the Spitfire was never as bad as that. It was flush riveted, and the rudder at the back there, you can see the rudder again, it's not that well pronounced. And the interior, there's nothing in there at all, is there? Just sinkholes and the part number, which is a shame. I also want to talk about the interior, floor pan, the pilot seat and the pilot. The floor pan, first of all, not sure how accurate that is. The pilot seat is definitely inaccurate. Never looked like that. And the pilot, he's covered in flash. I mean, he looks like he's sitting in a pool of sick, or standing in a pool of sick with his boots there. But the pilot himself looks pretty primate-ish. And this was a common feature in a lot of early generation model kits. Not so much with Airfix and Frog pilots. Well, no, actually Frog pilots were pretty bad as well. Revell pilots weren't brilliant. Airfix pilots tended to be sort of okay, but not great. But a lot of these pilots from the early generation 60s and late 50s kits, the pilots looked a bit primate-ish. And he is no exception, is he? He's pretty... He looks like he's going to go ooh, ooh, ooh in a minute. So that's something to watch out for with some of these early kits. You might actually do well to replace them with a more modern pilot. We've got the propeller spinner here. It's a different shape. Can you see it's a different shape to the Mark 1? It's more bulbous, and that is correct. The Mark 2 Spitfire had a very different type of feathering propeller system, and it required a much deeper and bulbousy spinner. That's the water radiator, the big square one. Again, that seems quite clean, not a lot going on there. And then you've got the upper wings, And again, you've got the same problem here. The ammunition boxes are actually in the wrong place. The elevators, as the ailerons are not very well defined for the fabric covering, and the wing is Rivet City. That will need sanding down. Not completely sand away, unless you want to rescribe stuff, because they are raised panel lines. I mean, this is an early generation kit. It's quite a bit of flash on there as well, as you can see. Yeah, quite a bit of flash on there. But those rivets will need dealing with. And again, the inside of the undercarriage wheel wells, they're pretty bland as well, aren't they? Flaps, rivets, yeah, that looks like it's going to need a little bit of cleaning up and sorting out. So that's the parts. The parts aren't terrible, but you know, when you think this kit was released in 1962, it wouldn't have had an awful lot of competition. And as you'll see in a minute with the options and costs, when I go through the Gumph, there aren't actually a huge number of options to go for if you're after a Mark II. Right, we'll just show you this image here so I can go through the bump. The kit we're doing an inbox review on is a Revell Supermarine Spitfire Mark IIA. The original release date was 1962 and the serial number was H612. The serial number of the kit I'm actually building is number H50, and the kit is moulded in 1/72 scale. There's actually decals for just one version, a Spitfire Mark II in RAF service circa 1940. The dimensions of the kit are roughly 5 inches long by 6 inches in span, and it should sit about 1.5 inches high on its undercarriage. The kit comprises 27 parts on 3 green plastic sprues and 1 clear plastic part, producing 28 parts total. Options and costs. Now, I'm only really incorporating 72nd scale options, and only options that were boxed as Mark IIs in the various versions of Mark IIs that you actually got. So, first of all, in 72nd scale, you can get a kit from AZ Models, who built a Spitfire Mark IIA, a Mark IIA long range, and a Mark IIB. These kits are all 3 different boxings of probably the same sprue in each boxing, and the kits retail for between £5 and £10. Airfix also did a Spitfire Mark II, which was actually an original Airfix BTK Spitfire kit, released in 1960. Got no pricings available on that kit, but I'm guessing it's going to be an absolute arm and a leg. Airfix also did a Mark IIA, which was a reboxing of the original Spitfire Mark 1A 1978 release. Do you remember the kit that was released on the blister pack Type 4B, blister pack card kit, if you like? And that kit is usually in a Series 2 box, and it retails about £5 to £10. Airfix also released a Battle of Britain Memorial Flight set, which incorporated a Spitfire Mark IIA, which was a 78 release from the card kits, Mark IIC Hurricane, which was actually a reboxed Hella kit, and a Lancaster B Mark 1-3, which was the second release Lancaster B Mark 1-3. It was the one that replaced the earlier Type, the 1950 odd release Lancaster. Airfix also produced a Mark IIA, which was the Airfix Spitfire Mark 1A 2010 release kit. The original release Mark 1A blister pack kit, which was converted to a Series 2A kit, retails about £5 to £10. The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight sets retail for between £20 and £40, and the Airfix Spitfire Mark IIA 2010 release kit retails between £12 and £15. Encore Models also do a Spitfire Mark IIA. No pricings available on that, but apparently it's not that bad. And Frog did a rather terrible Spitfire Mark II, which retails for between £10 and £20. Revell Spitfire Mark II and Mark IIA, which was actually also released as a Mark I, retails between £12 and £15. And the new tool 2010 release Spitfire Mark IIA retails between £7 and £15, and that's probably the best 72nd scale Spitfire Mark II on the market. Revell also produced a Fighting Juices set, which incorporated a Spitfire Mark II and a Messerschmitt 262A. No pricing's available on that, but I'm guessing that's going to be an arm and a leg as well. And they also did a 3 Battle of Britain fighter set comprising a Spitfire, a Hurricane, and a Messerschmitt Bf109E. Again, no pricings on that either, but that will probably be very collectible and quite pricey too. There were a couple of Reeboks and Repops. One was done by Kova Savodi Prostojove or KP Models, and they reboxed an AZ model kit of the Spitfire Mark II-B. That kit retails for between £8 and £10. And Revell also, of course, produced Revell Great Britain, Revell Kikola, Revell Japan, Revell Lodella, Revell Seiji, all released the Spitfire Mark IIA, which was the original Revell model from 1962, and that kit retails for anything between £3 and £15 in any of those boxings, but they are quite difficult to get hold of in the foreign market release boxings. Now then, conclusions. This is an early release Spitfire Mark II that Revell was still selling in 1995 in their new blue boxes. Though it was first released in 1962, it isn't as bad as you would think. Being the best of the early release first generation Spitfire models, the other two being the Airfix BTK and the Frog kits, it took the modelling world by storm. Now, I think it is greatly overshadowed by far better kits nowadays in the shape of the new released Airfix 2011 release Spitfire Mark II and the Revell 2016 release kits, but the kit itself really does show its age with all those rivets and severely raised panel lines. But for me the big issue is the early style Mark I cockpit canopy, and the tail fin looks a little odd. The pilot is also decidedly ape-like, but the kit does have really good decals. Another addition into my real old school video series. I'm looking forward to the outcome of this kit. I do think that with a little bit of work, I think this kit could come out quite nice. But I'm not holding out too much for it when you compare it to modern releases. So anyway, that's the inbox review for that really old Revell Spitfire Mark II. I hope this video has been of some use, and I hope that all of your projects are running smooth. If you have any questions, queries, any information on this kit whatsoever, just pop them in the comments boxes, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible with any answers required. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye bye for now.